I want to ask you about one more thing. We've already talking about this because you sent me a text while we were talking today, and I'll read the part of the text out that we're going to talk about. You say this, interesting conversation where David Seymour blamed me for, quote, making defamatory, untrue and misleading comments, end quote, about the fact that the New Zealand Initiative and Free Speech Union are both funded through the same streams, Atlas Network. So David Seymour, you ran into David Seymour and he accused you of making defamatory and untrue, misleading statements. So I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, so I was at Parliament today for a rally for the Mental Health Matters initiative, which is a really cool initiative around supporting youth mental health. And the reason we were there today was specifically around the defunding of the Suicide Prevention Office,
yep.
Which is a really important issue, but different topic. And I saw David Seymour walking past, just coming back from his lunch break, I guess. He had some Subway. And so I decided I'd run over to him and say, hey, because I've met David before. He was my local MP when I was in high school. And I met with him multiple times and had some really interesting conversations around the climate and that sort of thing. But I ran up to him and I said, hey, David, I just wanted to know, like, are you free sometime? Like, I tried to ask you on Twitter, but are you free sometime to sit down and have a chat about free speech and what the difference is between free speech and hate speech and why you've been making these comments about me online? And he said, oh, why should I talk to you about free speech? And I said, oh, because I'm the president of USA. And he went, oh. He then, basically went on to tell me that he didn't want to sit down and have a conversation with me because he didn't believe that my comments that I've made online were appropriate, and specifically pulled out, I think I made quite a throwaway comment when I was on News Talk ZB, where I said, and if you look at the New Zealand Initiative and the Free Speech Union, they're all funded through the same streams. And he kind of went on a bit of a rant at me for about a minute about how that's an untrue statement to make and it's defamatory. And he was like, I want to talk to you about the defamatory statements that you've been making around the funding of the Free Speech Union and the New Zealand Initiative. They're not, he just kind of went on a bit of a rage at me, which was not the greatest experience, but at least I talked to him.
Well, as a former graduate of the Atlas Network, it's interesting that he's so sure he knows where Atlas is spending their money. So if he knows it's not going there, then that implies he knows it's probably going to other places. Interesting that a graduate would know that, perhaps, Mark Hale.
Yeah, I don't know. I found it quite a weird thing for him to have latched onto because it was such a throwaway comment. And I didn't specifically mention the Atlas Network when I said it because I don't know a ton about them. Most of what I know has just been through when he did post about me on Twitter. There were a bunch of people in the replies saying, oh, of course you're defending these people because they're from the Atlas Network. And I was like, oh, and I did some research into it. But yeah, I thought it was a really weird thing for him to latch onto and to have a go at me about. And to say it was defamatory when I believe that there is evidence out there that the Free Speech Union and the New Zealand Initiative have both received funding from the Atlas Network previously.
Yeah. And the interesting question, why he went off at that, I mean, defensive much, methinks the lady doth protesteth too much, perhaps. I mean, if you're going to go off on that one thing, I wonder why that's the trigger point, Mark Hale. Just speculating out here, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I talked to some people I know and they, I'm friends with some of Salient and things, and they all said that they've seen a lot of him recently getting quite upset about any mention of the Atlas Network. So he just seems to be quite touchy about the subject at the moment.
Right. Kia ora again, whānau. The clip you've just watched is brought to you today by our patrons. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to get behind what we're doing, if you're enjoying our content and wanting to share our content, then maybe you would consider being a patron to Big Hairy News. Head to www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News to sign up to one of our levels and be a patron. At this point, we are only a listener and viewer supported show. It all comes down to you guys. If you feel like jumping on board to help, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Hooroo.